Why migrants abandoned their children on the Deadly Darien Gap route. That is a really surprising title for this video, but we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of it. First of all, the Darien Gap, where is it and what it is? It is a piece of jungle, a national park between Colombia in South America, and then you have, or north of that, you have Panama. And why are we talking about this? Because first of all, it has become a dangerous place for a lot of people. And the reason for that is if you go back into the 1990s, migrants began crossing the Darien Gap in the late 1990s with Colombians fleeing internal conflict and violence being the initial users. So in 2023, over 500,000 migrants traversed the dense jungle region to move from South America towards the southern US border, according to Newsweek and migrationpolicy.org. So it has been over 30 years people have been crossing through the Darien Gap. But then you need to go back even further than that. Who were the original indigenous people? Britannica.com said a few indigenous people, including the Chocó, specifically the Embera and the Wunan and Waunana and the Kuna, have traditionally lived in villages scattered throughout the forest. Its estimates of their combined local populations range widely from 1,200 people to about 25,000 people. But anyway, the story basically here is that in that part of the jungle, the Darien Gap, a lot of native people have lived there for hundreds of years and they've been just doing their own thing and minding their own business. But then in the 1990s, when conflicts started in Colombia, people started to move out and then they had to cross through the jungle to get to Panama and then move north. That said, there is an impact on the people there. It says the Darien Gap is a narrow land bridge that separates Colombia and Panama. It is inhabited by indigenous people, including the Emberan, Wunan, and Guna communities. Hundreds of thousands of people cross this gap each year, risking their lives to traverse it. The movement of migrants through the Darien Gap has significantly impacted indigenous communities in the area, leading to disruptions in their traditional way of life and potential conflicts over resources. Now, you could understand how this is going to be problematic, where maybe in the 90s you have a few hundred people would go through, and then all of a sudden you have 500,000 people going through. It's just basically a constant movement of people, and it takes about, if you on a good day, it takes about 5 to 7 days to cross that part of the jungle. So it is not one of your easy things to cross. So you have the indigenous people, and then now you have the migrants crossing, and that is where the problem is. Now let's talk about something about the region, the Darien Gap. It says the area's mountainous terrain and frequent rainfall can trigger landslides, and temperatures can reach 35 degrees centigrade or 95 Fahrenheit with high humidity, exacerbating persistent thirst, hunger. The area's wildlife, including crocodiles and venomous snakes, add to the dangers migrants face, as well as extreme physical challenges. They also risk attacks from smugglers and other criminal groups. So that is the context in which a lot of the people traveling through the area, most of the people traveling started especially after the issues in Venezuela. And a lot of migrants have been going to Colombia, crossing the Darien Gap, moving to Panama, Costa Rica, and then they go upwards with the hope of actually finally getting to the US. Now, as we've mentioned, venomous snakes, you have landslides, and you have the rivers, rapids, and all these dangers that people face. But it doesn't seem to deter the migrants who are determined to get to the US. And because of that, then you have news.un.org says that about between January and mid-December 2024, 55 migrants died while traversing the Darien Gap, and 108 80 children were abandoned over the course of the route. Since 2014, more than 50,000 migrants are known to have died worldwide while crossing the dangerous jungle. In the first 6 months of 2023, more than 60 migrants died trying to cross the gap. So it is quite dangerous. But then when you look at the death toll, it is quite impressive that people, with the amount of people dying on the way, it is people still go ahead and do it. And that just goes to show you the desperation and the desire, the hope that if you cross the Darien Gap, you get to the other side, there is hope for you to make it to the US and lead a better life. So obviously, if you're willing to go through the amount of danger, then it means you are probably living a situation that you consider to be worse than the danger you face ahead. So there have been cases, reports about the disruption this caused on the indigenous people and some of the indigenous people. Some of these reports have not been substantiated, but it says that some of the indigenous people have been now trying to take advantage of that, either using their boats to carry migrants from one end of the jungle to another, or some have been attacking the migrants and stealing from them. We don't know how true as to what degree that is, but that said, there is something that is quite that has been confirmed. The Spiegel.de said, within just a few years, the Gulf Clan, Colombia's most powerful cartel, has transformed one of the world's most dangerous migration routes into a global refugee highway, which generates millions of dollars each week. You have that. So you have a cartel, people passer, human trafficking, taking advantage of those people. So you pay and they either they rob you or even in some cases kill you, and then you get to the other side. Then you have the new humanitarian.org saying the Colombian side of the jungle is mostly controlled by the Gulf Clan, a criminal organization involved in drug and human trafficking that made an estimated 57 million from extortion along the migration route in just 10 months last year. If you're making that many millions of dollars extorting people, you would think others are thinking, well, what is this point of me starting having a startup when I could just go and extort people? It is absolutely unbelievable that, human misery, people see opportunity in that to extort people. So it is unbelievable. Within that context, it seems that other people, some probably unscrupulous people from the native population, are also taking advantage of that, probably working in conjunction with the cartels to make money. And it is good. It is this because the migrants actually are disrupting also the resources that the people have in the jungle. But the problem this causes is that when the migrants arrive at some of these indigenous villages, there are just so many of them that it becomes a new business for the locals. If they have money, you can sell things and make a lot more money than you would normally make. But then the problem is, once the migration crisis goes down, what will these people do? So it's just like a boom that everyone is like taking advantage of it before it burst. Talking about the children that have been abandoned. And the reason why the children have been abandoned in this case is quite tragic, to say the least, where it says 180 children were abandoned over the course of the route. Most of the reason is that the parents die during the migration. And if the parents die, other people are struggling already. Some people are not even able to walk. Some die on the way. Others have been attacked. And when you get to that situation, a child that's abandoned, what do? You can't, even if you try to help, you can't even help the child. So the child would either try to stick along and walk with all the refugees to get to the base camp somewhere, and then that's it. So it is tragic that such a thing would actually happen en route, but that is the face of migration that you don't often see, and it is tragic. It's not because the parents want to, but it's just the fact of life that traversing the jungle is dangerous, and not a lot of people make it. Most people will die of dehydration, or they break a leg and then they can't walk and there's no one else to help them, or they die, they start to lose their mind because of dehydration, the heat, and lack of food. So if you've gone through that over 2 days, people apparently would just sit on the side of the trail, and they just slowly slip away and they die if no one helps them. So that is another reality. But why does it take so long to cross the uh, Darien Gap? It says the Darien Gap is a 60-mile, 100-kilometer break in the Pan American Highway. It is densely forested jungle across northern Colombia and southern Panama. Migrants take this jungle trek because it is the only overland route from South America into Central America. The route takes 5 days and involves steep, muddy terrain, fast-flowing rivers, government-run camps in Panama. Migrants taking this sea route must pay between 1,200 and 1,500 for the journey. So it is a long stretch. If you have to walk on a flat road, 100 kilometers, it's long. It's just such a, if you're not used to it. But then if you combine that with the humidity of the forest, the terrain, mud, and everything that you can imagine, it just means it takes you a lot more effort, and it is not for the faint-hearted. So that is why many people actually die on the way there. And it just reminds you of the death zone in Everest, where people say once you get there, the likelihood of you actually finding people who have died on the climb is just there. And the people who have died are now being used as a landmark. When you get there, you meet this person, this person. It is crazy. And then you have the other problem here, that when people die on this road, it discourages others. You see them, it just puts you in a really sad mood that maybe it might be you the next time. And but then people still push ahead because it's what you do, because you want to survive. So there are other roads. There are no roads, basically, as it says here, to get to cross that part of the jungle. You either take a boat, but then the boat takes another route, and it's not an easy one either. So why are there no other alternatives? It says there are currently no viable alternative routes to bypass the Darien Gap. The challenging terrain, including mountains, swamps, and dense jungle, makes it virtually impossible to build a road or establish any other land-based transportation. However, people can choose to cross the Darien Gap by boat or by plane. Yeah, that said, there are videos, I think there are three main videos by YouTubers going into the jungle to see what it's like to experience the Darien Gap. The first one, surviving the world's deadliest migrant route, the Darien Gap, from Timmy Carter. You have another one, Bold and Bankrupt, hours traffic through the world's deadliest jungle. I think the most impacting of all these surviving the world's deadliest migrant route, because the YouTuber Timmy started to walk and they showed you know the difficulties, and then they talked about how it was hard for people just to survive. And then I think what's impacted, you don't really understand it until you actually see it in this video, and it is really sad. That's it. Yes, there are no roads. We already know that. But the worst part of it, why people go through the jungle, is that hundreds of migrants have reported being sexually assaulted while trekking through the deadly Darien Gap jungle in Panama on their way to the United States southern border, including a number of children abused in so-called rape tents, according to the New York Post. So you see that whenever there is a migrant crisis, a lot of refugees, there are also people who see that as an opportunity to go and take advantage of these people. And Doctors Without Borders actually reported on this situation and says the survivor from Venezuela is one of nearly 460,000 migrants who have crossed the Darien Gap so far this year on their journey north towards the United States. During this journey, they are exposed to risk, including falling from cliffs, drowning in rivers, as well as robbery, kidnapping, and rape. And one of the in the video by Bald and Bankrupt, he mentioned a guy apparently from Angola who came with his father, mother, his wife, and child. And during one of the crossing the rivers, the rapids, the river took the wife, the child, the parents, and he was left alone. So he was now in a dazed glaze where he was just walking around the camp. He doesn't know what to do. And that is the face of the reality of crossing this river. When if you lose your wife or your child during the crossing, you get to the other side in Panama, but you're basically out of your mind, and then you probably lose your mind. If you go into a PTSD shock, then it means your new life, even if you make it to the US, you're no longer the same. So that is another tragedy of people who have been either raped or killed. Wife were there, she was being raped, and he was trying to protest, and he was shot apparently. And then the question is, why isn't the government doing anything? Why couldn't they just close the gap and prevent all these people smugglers from doing it, from passing through these migrants? Okay, now in 2024, after so many years of people dying and crossing the Darien Gap, the conversation CNN.com also said, new policy by the Panamanian president, the US and Panama have signed an agreement to close the passage of illegal migrants through the Darien Gap. The Darien Gap is a treacherous route that spans parts of Central and South America. And you're thinking, finally, why didn't they do that from the start? Why couldn't you stop it? But I think the problem here is that there's no desire to do anything about it. This just reminds you about the crossing the channel between France and the UK, where now people just don't care. If the migrants and the refugees could find the people trafficking and pay them to cross the channel, then it means the government could also find them and probably arrest them and try to stop these organized crime. But it just seems that nobody cares. You know, another migrant dying, so what? Another child being abandoned inside the Darien Gap. So basically, a lack of empathy. If it's not happening in your back door, it doesn't concern your family, your child, basically nobody cares.